Welcome to a special edition of the Doc Talk podcast presented by BetFred Sports. I'm Travis Justice. He is Dr. Rob Zatechka. First of all, let me apologize for our late start tonight. Dr. Rob actually had to play doctor tonight. You know what I was doing, Dr. Rob?
This is like 2 out of 3 times we've done this in 1 week.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell? Do you think you have to be in surgery and help people out with their aches and pains?
Yeah, it is the day job.
So my day job today, see, look at that. He says that excuse again. He needs to recognize his real job, and that would be the Doc Talk podcast presented by BetFred Sports. I'm just saying. I mean, I was at a tequila tasting tonight with Brendan Stye, and I was treating him to some really fine tequila.
You talked to us about that. Yeah,
yes.
I mean, you guys were talking about that after when we did the podcast with Brendan.
Yeah, so we had Brendan out to our tequila tasting at MCL Construction. It was a good time, but you know what? I said, priorities, people. I've got to leave. I left a bunch of clients. I left a bunch of coworkers. I said, damn it, we've got something to do. We've got to go talk about Troy Dannen being named the new athletic director at the University of Nebraska. Now, before we get dive into tonight's subject, just remember that to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's very, very simple. Just go to YouTube, search at Doc Talk Sports, hit subscribe, and you can get all our videos when we produce new content, when we produce new podcasts. You'll be able to watch them right there. And every once in a while, we put shorts and stuff like that up there. This is an interactive show. There is a comment section. Whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you can put your comments in the section, and you'll be able to ask Dr. Rob a question, because Lord knows you're sure as hell not going to have questions for me. But if you do want to participate in the show, if you want
tonight, people might.
Yeah, you might. You can call in the show. We already have 2 people on hold. 402-543-5556. It's 402-543-5556. A week ago, we were blown away at the fact that Trev Alberts stepped down and left Nebraska for Texas A&M. We saw it coming basically out of nowhere. And then this morning, Dr. Rob, boom, out of nowhere, Nebraska decides they're just going to hire an athletic director. Were you surprised at the timing of the hiring of Troy Dannen?
I'm surprised at how fast it happened. I mean, literally in 1 week's period of time, you have Trev announcing that he's leaving, being announced as the AD at A&M, and literally 1 week later, we got Troy Dannen. And now the other thing that's kind of interesting about it is that I did not know Troy Dannen. I'm sure I've seen the name floating around in athletic circles and in the media. I mean, absolute zero in terms of being on my radar. I mean, everybody had talked about Jamie Pollard. Everybody had talked about Garth Glissman. And there was kind of a short list of some other people that had bounced around. I just hadn't seen the name pop up. And I think a lot of it was because I think very few people assumed that he would leave Washington after 6 months. That I think,
Bingo.
I think that was a big part of that. Nobody thought about it because of that. On the flip side, I don't know the last time I've seen a hire of this magnitude that's been so universally applauded. Everybody likes the guy, everybody.
And I can tell you this, I know this for a fact. Nebraska did not use a search firm. They interviewed 3 different candidates for the athletic director's job, and Troy was the one that stood out. And he gets a 6-year deal. He's going to make $1.6 million a year. By the end of his contract, it's going to be up to 2.1. He's going to get $1 million signing bonus, which is also the move bonus. I hope he can move from Seattle to Lincoln for $1 million. I don't think that's going to be a hard thing to do. Now, a lot of people are probably wondering, like you, who's Troy Dannen? So I'm going to share a story here, and if you want to call, you can at 402-543-5556. If you want to leave comments, you can. We're going to try to do the best of that. If you want to move your comments up to the higher section and guarantee they get on, go ahead and leave a donation, and you can. We'll make sure that your comment gets straight to the top and gets on the air. So Owen's monitoring the comments right now. He's in charge of those. He's also in charge of phone calls, so you can do that. Troy Dannen is a person that I've known for 33 years, Rob. 33 years I've known Troy Dannen. The day Trev Alberts quit, and I hope he doesn't mind me relaying the story, the first text I got was from you. The second text I got was from Troy Dannen. And I didn't think he was on the radar for the Nebraska job. I didn't even ask him if he would be interested, just because he was just asking me, hey, what did you hear? And I said, hell, you're an AD in the Big Ten. You tell me what you heard. And he didn't have many answers either. But I never once thought to say, hey, are you interested in the job? For what you exactly just said, he'd only been at Washington for 6 months, right? So him and I exchanged some texts back and forth that day, and that was like the last I'd heard. And then today I'm like, oh, so then I start texting him today after I see that he's going to get the job, and he's ghosted me. I'm like, okay, you can't ghost me now because just let me know that you got this. And I just said, congratulations, and you're invited to the basement. You're going to have a good time, and I got a thumbs up. Now, here's where my relationship with Troy Dannen starts. It goes back to 1990, 1991. He was working for the Iowa Girls Athletic Union, and he was kind of the assistant at that time to Mike Henderson, who was like kind of like the media liaison, did a lot of stats and stuff like that. Troy grew up in that organization, eventually took over as the executive director of the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, went from there to Northern Iowa, where he's the athletic director, then went to Tulane. So, and then to Washington. So him and I maintained a relationship. And he was so cool because my daughters, Abigail and Mary, both worked on a coffee shop on the Tulane campus. My girls went to Loyola New Orleans, but it runs parallel to the Tulane campus. And Troy was so cool. He would go in and talk to my daughters. And every once in a while, he would take a selfie with my daughters, and he'd send them to me during my morning show, which I thought was super cool. So we maintained that relationship. A year and a half ago, I was down in New Orleans visiting my daughter. I called him, and I sat in his office for 45 minutes. He got me on one of those golf carts. So we went all around the Tulane campus, showed me his facilities, and we just spent, a good 2 hours together, reminiscing and talking. And I knew he was looking for a job then because he'd done a great job at Tulane. The facilities were top notch. He'd built a following for Tulane. He hired Willie Fritz, and then he got the Washington job. And I tell you what, he walked into a really good situation. Kalen DeBoer was his head coach. They played for a national championship. And then he has to replace Kalen DeBoer, and he hires the guy from Arizona. And now, boom. I just want everybody to know in Nebraska. Everybody knows that you and I go back and forth about the Iowa thing, and people are pissed. I've seen some people mad. The only knock they have on Troy right now is he's from Iowa. Grew up on a farm outside of Marshalltown.
That's where my dad's from.
You're getting a good dude. I just want you to know you're getting a good dude. And I think you're going to get somebody who can stabilize this thing quickly. You're going to get somebody who understands college athletics. He's been at a small school. He's been at a medium school, and he's been at a big school. And I think there's a lot of hard knocks there. If you can run an organization, and if you can run an athletic department in Northern Iowa where you're dealing with Division I AA, you're not getting the money flowing in. Then you go to Tulane. Listen, Tulane has a good football program now. They got really cool uniforms. But the truth is you're dealing with so many different things that the Power Five isn't. And then you learn more once you get to Washington. This is going to be a good fit. I know he has a lake house just south of Des Moines. His wife's from Iowa. They're going to be happier back here in the Midwest. I can promise you that. They're going to be happier back in the Midwest. And he's 55, 56 years old. This could be if it works out, could be the last job that he has. I really do believe that. Nebraska hit a home run with this. I really do believe that.
And that was the thing that was interesting to me is because first off, I saw it pop up. A buddy of mine sent me I don't know if I'd call it the announcement, but kind of there was sort of the preliminary, hey, this is the likely hire. And the first thing I did was you kind of start going down the resume, and you see Northern Iowa. And so the first thought I think of is like, well, I know Trav's really good buddies with Mark Farley, the football coach at Northern Iowa. Man, I'm going to see if Trav knows. I'll see if Trav will ask Mark Farley what Mark Farley thinks of this guy. That was my logic. And so I texted you that question. And you're like, Mark Farley goes, I know the guy. It's like I've been friends with him for 3 decades.
Yeah. So I think Nebraskans can breathe a little easier. There's always going to be an uneasiness, right? When there's a transition, people are always uneasy if they don't know somebody, if he's not the big name. People are like, is this the best we could do? I'm telling you, give Troy a chance. I think you will definitely be pleased with what he has to offer, the vision that he brings, and what he can do for Nebraska athletics. 402-543-5556. Greg called in 15 minutes before. Really, Rob, he's been on hold 23 minutes. Greg in Tulsa.
Sorry about that.
Has been on hold for
that's
23
mostly
minutes.
My fault.
He's a patient guy. Greg in Tulsa, welcome to the Doc Hawk podcast presented by BetFred Sports. What's going on?
And a good evening to the Iowa fan. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
My question is, I'm listening to all the great reasons why Dannen came to Nebraska, all the things we have to offer. And it sounds wonderful. But Chris Staples asked a great question. If it's that wonderful, why did Alberts leave?
We've talked about this a couple different times. We talked about a week ago. We talked a little bit about it on Monday night. And I do believe, Greg, there's some ambition here when it comes to when college football comes around to being a super conference or almost a professional league on its own. It's going to need a commissioner. I think Trev has a higher aspiration of saying, hey, I've got Big Ten experience. I've got SEC experience. And he wants to be the czar, should we say, but a commissioner would be a better word, of college football. Rob, would you agree with that?
I do. I mean, I do think there was reasons why Trev left that had to do with sort of the leadership gap at Nebraska. And I think, the other big announcement today was Jeffrey Gold being named as the priority candidate for the president's position. I think one of the things that probably was on at least somewhat of a checklist for Dannen coming here, and it would have been for any new athletic director coming in, is that position had to get locked down. Now, whether it's a great candidate, okay candidate, whatever, that position has to get locked down. Now, Trev had gone 9 months without that position being filled. And it did. And I mean, from my understanding, it's like I said, I don't have a ton of inside conversation that's come back to me on the president's side of it, but I've got a little bit. And the little bit that I've heard is that Trev did, in fact, have multiple conversations with higher ups at the university about, hey, why is this not getting filled? This is hindering my vision of what I want to do at this university, my ability to carry that out. And so that leadership gap did play into Trev's decision to leave. And I don't think you can ignore that. Now, I think with a new guy coming in, as unfortunate as that situation is with Trev, and as big a question mark as that probably still leaves, well, why didn't they go ahead and get this done earlier? Why didn't the higher up see the writing on the wall with Trev being disgruntled about that lack of leadership? Is that situation fixed? That's going to be the big question mark. Is that leadership situation fixed? You don't fix anything like that overnight. No. On the flip side, I'm quite sure on some level they're moving in that direction, though, to fixing it. So is it a perfect situation? No, it's not. It's not a perfect situation. But maybe no job is perfect, and there's probably some flaws in the Washington job that Dannen's thought this would be better.
What else you got, Greg?
Well, I guess I loyalty counts to me, and I didn't see that, and I don't think the people, if I were going to hire Alberts, his lack of loyalty would ring a bell.
I think Trev was loyal. I do. But there comes a point where, listen, I'm loyal to a point, but if an offer comes my way, I would probably have to think about it. Rob's loyal to a point that if a job came up down in Florida where your daughter lives, you might go, you know what? Maybe it's time to try something else. In sports, there is no loyalty. You need to understand that, Greg, is that loyalty in sports is hard to come by now. Just because coaches will move on. Hell, look at NIL. Players will move on. Athletic directors are going to move on. This isn't the 70s. It's not the 80s. The loyalty you're looking for, I just don't think it's going to be there anymore in the college sports world.
Well, and the question also is that, I mean, there's got that loyalty there has to be a little bit of reciprocity there. You can't be blindly loyal.
Yeah.
And I think Trev felt like, and again, like I said, I wasn't in on these conversations, but I think Trev on some level was asking the university, hey, there's some things you got to do in terms of shoring up that leadership hierarchy. And for 9 months, it hasn't happened. That hasn't been done. We need to do that. And it wasn't getting done. Now, like I said, I don't know all of those conversations, but that loyalty's got to go both ways. And if there were some things that Trev was asking for in terms of that leadership structure at the university, then that's something that, there's some responsibility that falls on the university side of this as well, too. It's not just a Trev thing where you got to be blindly loyal to an institution no matter what.
I think what hurts the most, and Greg, thanks for the phone call. We appreciate it, your time tonight. And thanks for waiting on hold. I think what hurts a lot of people is you have a guy that played at Nebraska. You have a guy that embraced the state, embraced the job, said all the right things, and then boom. Listen, he didn't let anybody know. Matt Rule was in Scotland, I believe, when he found out. Okay, you had his closest confidants and people who work with him who didn't know, and he kept that pretty close to the vest. So that when you talk about that, you're like, holy crap. There was something going on there. We're going to get into the Dr. Gold situation as well. But let's go back to the phones at 402-543-5556. Let's go to Jerry in Omaha. Jerry, welcome to the Doc Talk podcast presented by BetFred Sports. What's going on?
Hey, I'm surprised you guys let me on again. Owen's got to do a better job of screening your calls. And I'm not usually up this late at the rest home. I do have a question at the end. Dr. Rob, am I going to be billed for this? And another thing, it seems like I talked to you now. When I was on the table, I talked too long. You just pushed a button, I was out.
Better living through chemistry, Jerry.
Now, can I cover this on my Medicare? But anyway, no, I'm only kidding about the rest home, but someday. Anyway, my question is about Doc Gold. You already answered about my question about Troy, so I feel better about that after listening to Travis. About Doc Gold, having a doctor as president, is that a good idea? I mean, come on. Is it going to, if there's a problem, they're going to say, call me in the morning. No, take 2 aspirins, call me in the morning. I mean, a doctor as president, you know how doctors are. And another thing, not getting on the guy, but, the COVID, I didn't like the way he handled COVID, but I think he's a great way he handled the med center. But that's my question. I guess you could start going about having a doctor as a president of a university and not tied in with the sports part and the other stuff that you guys talked about with the, all the other issues. That's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate it.
So, that is an interesting question. And doctors are, I'm one of them. Doctors are they're different cats. And it's, you've got some different views on how organizational structures ought to be. I guess the one thing I would say about Gold is that you've got a guy that, for a physician, he's been in academic institution administration for a long time. Now, and I truth be told, he came into the med center after I was there. So even though I went through medical school, I went through residency training, I was a staff physician, I was an assistant professor there. I wasn't there when Gold was there. So I never did have any real overlap with him in that time period. And so I don't have a lot of direct experience with him. Now, that being said, you've got a guy that I don't know how much time he spent in the operating room. His background's in cardiothoracic surgery. But I do know you've got a guy who's been in academic administration at high levels for a very long time. So the experience is there. I mean, the experience is definitely there. You had a guy who during some budget crunch times was willing to step in while being the chancellor at UNMC and taken over as the interim chancellor at UNO as well, too, until Dr. Lee came in to take over as the full-time chancellor at UNO. So you've got a guy that's held down some very high level, pretty extensive university administration positions over the last 10 years or so here. The doctor thing, I'm not sure that plays into it really. You've got a guy that I don't want to call him a career university administrator because he's not, but he's got a lot of experience doing it.
Here's the deal with Dr. Gold. He's smarter than anybody you'll ever meet. He's smarter than you, Rob, and that's saying a lot. No, he's a smart dude. Here's where the interesting part is, because what will the mission be of Dr. Gold as president? Will it be academic focused or will it be athletics focused, or can you find the mix between the two? We're already hearing rumors because of the AAU situation to combine the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Bring those two under one fold. I know Dr. Gold's been a big proponent of that. What does that do? And you need everybody on the same page, right? You need the academics on the same page. You need athletics on the same page. Listen, I understand grant money is a lot. And to get back in the AAU, having UNMC under the umbrella of UNL will be a very big deal. What is the brand of the university? Rob, what's the brand? It's athletics.
It always has been.
It always has been. The brand of the university is athletics, plain and simple. And the truth is, I'm not taking it away from the education at UNMC, UNL, UNO, UNK, ever. I'm just telling you that fans don't care about it. Fans care about winning on football field, winning on the basketball court, and having the best possible teams there. That's all donors care about. That's all fans care about. Owen just put up a comment right there who said he worked at UNMC for years.
And he's kind of one of our regular guys. He usually comments. Yeah. And I mean, he said he's worked for years and said the guy's an absolute genius.
Yes.
So I love to hear that. Like I said, I've had a little, I don't want to, not like separation from UNMC, but I mean, I've got a day job. It's not at UNMC, so I don't necessarily have as much of a finger on the pulse of the place as I did when I worked there. So here's my question. Travis, maybe you can answer this for me. All of a sudden, you're hearing AAU again popping up. When Nebraska left the Big 12 to join the Big 10, I kind of felt like the whole AAU thing sort of like went away, that it was this, who gives a rat's ass? We're in the Big 10 now. We're getting Big 10 TV money. We're getting Big 10 academic grant and research money. We don't have to worry about AAU anymore. Who cares? Let Texas worry about that. Why is this coming up all of a sudden just within the last 6 months to a year, while this is now all of a sudden a thing again?
Rob, I don't get it. Maybe it's a prestige thing. Maybe it's an ego thing. You want to be considered one of those top elite academic institutions. The lay person doesn't give a shit. They don't give a shit if you're part of the AAU.
I agree. And it seems to me that it's sort of it's not like being in the AAU gets you more grant money. It's having the grant money allows you to qualify to be in the AAU.
Yes.
So it's sort of like this rubber stamp of, hey, you made it now. Like, just keep going and doing what you were doing before.
And that would be
nothing material has changed.
And that would be the reason to bring UNMC under the umbrella of UNL, which again just confuses things because you get the medical school in Omaha, you've got UNL in Lincoln. It's no different than that engineering mess down there, right? Is you got a great engineering school in Omaha, but your degree says University of Nebraska, Lincoln. Or if you go to criminal justice in Lincoln, your degree says University of Nebraska, Omaha. It's so messed up that it's so confusing.
It's make it University of Nebraska.
Thank you. Bring Omaha, Kearney, Lincoln, UNMC under one umbrella. That would be the easy thing to do. It'd be less confusing. But
and then and I understand on the sports side of it, you've got that. You've got that identification on the sports side,
and you can keep it that way.
Yeah, it's Omaha, it's Nebraska Kearney, or it's Kearney for UNK. It's just, you allow that, and I don't think it's academically. I mean, my older brother's got a PhD that says UNMC. He was on the UNL campus the whole time he was working on his UNMC PhD.
See, that makes no sense. But going back to the AAU thing, it's an ego thing. It's a status thing that the average fan does not care about it. AAU, according to McSlackmaster, is legacy status by dinosaur academic boomers. That's a pretty good way to put it, right?
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Now, I'm also one of these guys that I tend to look at the ivory tower academicians of the world, where you're looking at assistant professor and associate professor and full professor and tenured professor. And I've been in that world. My dad was a longtime university administrator. He wasn't a professor. He was on the admin side of stuff. But that whole world of professorships and tenure and all of that, I mean, I keep going back to the quote, the whole thing about, it gets attributed to Henry Kissinger. I don't know if he actually did say it, but it's the academic politics are particularly vicious because the stakes are particularly small.
But
you got all these people fighting for these little tiny tidbits of professorships and tenureships that doesn't really net them a whole lot other than a title, but it's something that people just absolutely fight tooth and nail for. And I'm sitting here going, it's like, I don't care. I just want to stick needles in people and give them drugs and make them sleepy. So,
all right, Aaron says, that's an interesting way to spell Aaron. I've never seen it spelled that way. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Dr. Rob and Trav, why do you think they couldn't get a president and chancellor for the last 7 months, but when Trev left, they find him in 3 days? You know, I heard a good thing from a regent, because Governor Pillen made some statements. It took them longer to find a president when they found Ted Carter than it did Jeffrey Gold. And everybody thinks it took a long time. And maybe in Trev Albert's mind, it took a long time. But when they hired Ted Carter, it was actually a longer process. I think Trev leaving maybe showed the sense of urgency that needed to happen. You need to have leadership in an athletic department. Troy Dannen's going to provide that now. And then you need to have leadership running a university. And I always think Dr. Gold was a target, Rob. I really do. I think Dr. Rob or Dr. Gold was always a target. This just expedited that process.
No, and there's some different dynamics going on. And I will say, I mean, we talk about the sort of the face of most major universities ends up being the athletic department. And in Nebraska's case, that's definitely so. There's some dynamics in terms of the speed at which things are changing in the athletic world that I think necessitated Nebraska having to have leadership at a time when they didn't. A few years ago, when they were trying to bring Dr. Carter on, when they were bringing Ted Carter on board, Admiral Carter rather, that's one of those things that we didn't have some of these issues. When you're looking at everything from the world of conference realignment to NIL to the collectives, to booster money in general, where that's going, to the stadium project, to the football facility project, which is still not 100% done. They're still working on completing that.
Don't get me started on that, because I'll get in trouble.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is that you've got a lot of these ongoing changes and requirements for booster money, for money in general. You've got a different world on the conference landscape that you didn't have, that over the last 9 months necessitated strong, stable leadership hierarchy that maybe wasn't needed when we had an interim and we were looking at President Carter. Can we put Eric's comment back up here? So
bottom line is that yet to name president, it's going to be Dr. Gold. Mr. Dannen and Rule, yes, it's still a football school, need to be on the same page or the cycle continues.
100%.
that's no different with any organization you work in.
It is, but it's not something that's always been there for Nebraska. When you go back to the time,
Harvey fucking Perlman. Okay,
when
that's all I
Perlman
got to
was
say.
Exactly, you had I mean, you had different leadership going in different directions. People were not all rowing the boat in the same direction under Perlman. And then that it showed on the field. It showed it showed throughout the athletic department. When you look at a lot of the flux throughout the athletic department, especially in terms of the big revenue sports like football and men's basketball, just look at the last 20 years. People were not on the same page. And you see the results of that. Eric makes a great comment there. If you want on-field success, people all have to be on the same page, and you got to have that leadership hierarchy in place. And the extent of that hierarchy, everybody has to have the same goals and the same vision. That's a great point, Eric.
Eric, thanks for the donation as well. We appreciate it. If you want your comment to go straight to the top, send in a donation, and we'll go ahead and get your comment on. But let's go straight to the phones now at 402-543-5556. Let's go up to northern Minnesota. That's where John is. John, welcome to the Doc Talk podcast presented by BetFred Sports. What's going on, John?
Good evening, Rob and Travis, 88 graduate. And you kind of hit on it in your last comment, but the first thing that I thought of when Trev left was the stadium project and the athletic facilities that were going to be built. Where does that? Do you think that it's an unanswerable question exactly? But where do you think that puts these things? Would they have to back them up, or could that have led to the speed in which this happened?
Well, it can't go away, and let me tell you why, John. In the fact that the stadium is 100 years old, there are code violations in that stadium that need to be addressed as soon as possible. The restroom situation is horrible. You have other things that need to be fixed.
What's wrong with the urinal troughs in the men's bathroom? Those are perfectly fine,
I like
Travis.
to take a piss in a urinal in a trough. I do, but the truth is there are code violations. It needs to be updated. People might have had sticker shock at the $400 and some million, probably going to reach close to $500 million. But I can tell you this, that when they were discussing all possibilities, tearing down Memorial Stadium was an option. I know for a fact that tearing down Memorial Stadium was an option. Nebraska fans would have been pissed off. They would have gone crazy if you would have turned that down. But you have to maintain. And people don't like suites. They don't like other aspects. You have to find revenue drivers. Trev Alberts said it the other day when he got hired at Texas A&M. There is a $15 to $20 million expense item coming to athletic departments very soon, and that's going to come into the payment of college athletes. The NIL is one thing, but they are going to take this in-house and start paying players. So you're going to have to come up with a $15 to $20 million payroll every single year. How do you do that? You either cut expenses or you drive new revenue. New revenues in suites, low seats, whole other different aspect. That becomes a revenue driver if you fix the stadium up. So to answer your question, John, you have to keep the stadium project moving in the right direction. The academics need to get on board. The fans need to get on board. And the athletic department needs to get on board. It cannot come to a halt, or Nebraska is going to struggle finding new revenue. And if you have to cut, if you can't find new revenue, what happens, Rob? Men's gymnastics, gone. I could start going through a lot of other sports that may disappear at the University of Nebraska.
And that's something we've seen happen at other universities that are not in a position monetarily like Nebraska is. I mean, I still firmly believe Nebraska is in a good position monetarily compared to a lot of their peer schools.
I don't disagree with that, but times are changing and you have to keep up. The stadium project, as much as I would like to be a part of it in my real job, has to stay on task or Nebraska will fall behind. Oh, and bring that question back up. And John, thanks for the phone call. We appreciate your time tonight. Very much appreciated. Ken has sent in a $10 donation. Could the AAU affect admission standards for athletes' ability to recruit? No. That's a simple answer, don't you think?
I would think so. I don't know my understanding is that admission standards.
It's a land grant school, man.
Yeah, well, the other thing is I'm also thinking back to the time period that Nebraska was in the AAU.
Yeah.
And there's another thing we could blame Harvey for. You lost the AAU status, Perlman. Come on. I don't think those admission standards were exactly Harvard level back when Nebraska was in the AAU.
I got it in Nebraska. I didn't go, but the University of Nebraska accepted me. That says a lot about what the admission standards are. Okay?
I don't think I'm not sure that actually plays into AAU eligibility for a given university. So I don't think it'll play in. Now, here's my other question that I would have for you. Is Nebraska the only Big Ten school not in the AAU?
Yes.
Okay. If that's the case, are you telling me that everybody who goes to Ohio State has these just absolutely superlative high school grades and test scores?
Cardell Jones, we ain't here to do no school. I mean,
you said it.
We ain't here to do no school.
I mean, there's a lot of players at a lot of schools across multiple sports, and I will kind of stand by the fact that I think the vast majority of college athletic teams, the average GPA of the sports team generally is higher than the average GPA of the general student body. That's a fact at most places, Nebraska included. So most student athletes are going to be good. There's always going to be a few people that kind of fall through the cracks, so to speak. But you can't tell me that all of these schools that have had really, really great football and basketball over the last 10, 20 years in the Big Ten, the Ohio States, the Michigans, Michigan State, that these schools have significantly higher admission standards or significantly higher academic quality of recruits coming in than Nebraska has.
I would agree with you. And Ken, thanks for the donation. We appreciate it. If you have comments and you want to move yours straight to the top, go ahead and throw in a donation. Otherwise, we'll get to your comments as we come along. 402-543-5556. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go down to Atlanta, Georgia. That's where Chuck is. This our beer man, Chuck? Is this our beer man, Chuck?
It's not your beer man, but I'm going to drink some beer.
Yeah, good.
Craig's our beer man in Atlanta.
Right. First of all, a couple quick points.
Okay.
Couple quick thoughts. AAU, I think Dr. Gold is, and what that Nebraska medical facility brings to that equation, I think is a slam dunk. So I think that checks a great box. Hopefully he's aligned with the athletic director. As far as loyalty goes, I would just say that, I think people today want to believe in loyalty, but the fact of the matter is loyalty, it comes down to what's best for the individual and their family. I think about Danny Kaelin was committed to Missouri, right? And thank goodness, he came back to Nebraska. And last thing, Harvey Perlman, I'd love to have you guys get him on that show sometime and get a T-shirt. Go back to some of your references earlier, Travis, because that continues to be just the ultimate source of problems for Nebraska.
Yeah, I don't think people understand the damage Harvey Perlman did to the University of Nebraska. That's my personal opinion. I think a lot of people would agree with it, but that guy did a lot of damage as the chancellor at the University of Nebraska, and it's taken 20 years to even try to see the end of the tunnel. And I think Trev kind of threw people for a loop for a little bit. Hopefully Troy can turn it around. Chuck, appreciate the phone call. Thanks for calling tonight on the Doc Talk podcast presented by BetFred Sports. If you have a phone call, 402-543-5556. If you have a comment, you can go ahead and leave it in the comment section. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, as you're watching this, please do so. If you're watching on Twitter, thank you. If you're watching on Facebook, thank you. If you're watching on Twitch, thank you. If you're watching on LinkedIn, hell, we're even on LinkedIn tonight.
We're on Twitch?
I have a Twitch channel. I always get the Twitch analytics, and it's like, you had one view on Twitch. I'm like, oh, okay. But I have it just to have it. So yeah, we're going everywhere tonight. Rob, what do you think is going to be Troy Dannen's toughest thing taking over the Nebraska job? Is that just I don't think he has to unify coaches or anything like that. You probably got to calm a staff down who's probably wondering, am I going to be part of your staff? Do you want me to be a part of this? But besides that, what's the big thing that Troy Dannen has to do as he eases into this job?
I think booster relationships. I think that's going to be the big one. And then the thing that's really tied to that is the whole NIL thing. It's going to be establishing those relationship with the boosters, and how do you work NIL in terms of the collective currently as it sits with 1890 to where that's going to go in the future. I mean, you've got huge amounts of booster dollars that at one point in time, a lot of that booster money was heading into the athletic department itself. Now it's going to 1890. And that was something that I think athletic department administrators, Trev included, had talked about, was kind of the new dynamic that you had to deal with in college football. And then what are the changes with NIL? With, again, I say this a little presumptively, but the assumption is at some point that's going to come in-house. On the collective side, you're not going to see these separate collectives forever. At some point, that's going to come under the auspices of the university itself. So those are going to be kind of the big thing. The next thing is keeping those projects going. When you look at the football facility, when you look at the stadium project, these are huge projects to take on. And this is stuff that Trev spearheaded, that now you're coming in, that you're going to have to bring yourself up. And I mean, I say bring yourself. The university is going to have to bring him up to speed on these projects and get a unified vision. I mean, we talk about a unified vision within the university when you talk about a board of regents, a president, the chancellor, the athletic director, the coaching staff, the athletes. There's got to be a unified vision there. You've got to have that same unified vision coming over to the boosters as well, too, in terms of them aligning with what your vision is for that athletic department. Building that football facility, renovating the stadium, that's a huge vision that you've got to have everybody on board with, including the money donors.
So, one knock on Troy Dannen that people will talk about goes to his Northern Iowa days, and that he dropped, and he had to. I mean, Northern Iowa is not a self-sustaining athletic department. It uses state of Iowa tax dollars to subsidize its athletic department. And when you're in a situation like that, you have to make tough decisions. He cut baseball. Baseball was a sport that was cut from Northern Iowa under Troy Dannen's watch. People were pissed off, mad. I saw a tweet today from the former Northern Iowa play-by-play announcer who's like, hey, watch out, snake in the grass. He was on a radio show, said he wouldn't drop baseball, and then he turned around and dropped baseball. Do you think sports will be dropped at the University of Nebraska? As this, I know it's a loaded question, but it's one that needs to be addressed because you do have to cut expenses or find new revenue. And sometimes you have to do both. Do you think sports will be dropped at the University of Nebraska?
I don't know. I mean, it's happened so many places. I mean, look at all the sports that got cut at Iowa 2 years ago. That's a hard question to answer. My hope would be, from what's currently down there at the university right now, I would hope not. And the reason I say that is because, again, I look at where Nebraska sits in terms of its peer schools from a revenue standpoint. Few Midwestern land-grant universities, athletic departments can print money like Nebraska. And it's been that way for decades. I don't know if they're going to cut sports. Nebraska's had to do that. It's I mean, that's a possibility that might happen. So
Ken, you're doling out the cash tonight. It's like you're at the blackjack table. I'm telling you, whatever you do, download the BetFred Sports Iowa app, go over to the Council Bluffs side, and start making your bets on the NCAA tournament. Make sure to bet Iowa State. I'd bet Drake, and I would take Nebraska over Texas A&M. There's a 3-game parlay for you. But Ken says bringing NIL in-house may be short-sighted. You subject yourself to Title IX right out of the gate. Though this may be forced by litigation. And that's what, and I think, and Ken, thanks for the donation again.
That's that's something that gets consistently brought up. When I look at that, there's two things that I think happen here. I mean, number one, I think if it comes in-house, I do think there's a big equalization of this.
Yes.
Now, here's the other thing as well, too, because everybody's like, oh, well, I think people lose sight of the fact that I think if that happens, I think NIL doesn't get paid out like scholarship money. I think NIL gets paid out like salary. You now become a university employee.
Bingo.
Now, guess what? Title IX doesn't count towards it. That's not an employee thing. That if Title IX counted with employees, guess what? You would have to pay the person on the cleaning crew in the cafeteria the same thing that you're paying the university president.
And let's say you had $20 million spread over the number of sports Nebraska has. NIL is not going away. You need to keep it. You need to keep that in mind. But the NIL, as we see right now, was never the intention of NIL. So you move. Let me finish, and you can follow up on it. You move the pay for play part of it. You move the pay for play part of it in-house to where the university covers it. The NIL deals that we're seeing now are horseshit, to where, well, you go do a charity event and we're going to pay you to do a charity event. You do that. NIL to me, Rob, and I think the best example of people go, oh, he's beating his Iowa drum. Caitlin Clark is the poster child for NIL. She has Nike. She has State Farm. She has Hy-Vee. She has a number of that's name, image, and likeness. When a corporation come in and say, can we use your name, image, and likeness to represent us? So you can still get paid from the university, but high-end athletes can still go get NIL deals in the traditional form as being a spokesperson. Dakotas Crawford is still the best Nebraska one we've ever seen, right? Was that SOS Heating and Cooling?
Yeah, and Polar Bear took over that.
That's what NIL is. It isn't, hey, give to a collective and they'll distribute money. That's just
booster dollars going straight to athletes.
Yes,
is what it is.
But that's not a sustainable model. You cannot ask donors to fund a payroll every single year, because you know what comes along with that? Expectations. Expectations come along with that. And pretty soon, if you're not a program that succeeds, boosters going to say, what's my return on investment here? What is my return on investment? If you don't get a return on your investment, they're not going to give anymore. It's not a sustainable model.
And that's when you talk about NIL coming under the umbrella of the university, it's that collective money that we're talking about. We're not talking about, it's not like everything. It's not like all NIL is now under the control of the university or being doled out by the university. NIL moved so fast from what people thought it would be, like you had said with Caitlin Clark, to that collective model. We're just talking about the collective model. It's these dollars that are going into the collectives. That's what people are talking about coming under the university umbrella.
Well, but I don't even think, and Eric, thanks again. So I'll get to this real quick because you paid to go to the top. So we may have to wait longer for seats at Memorial. He sighs. My ass will continue to fight for a bench spot. I don't. That's going to keep in motion. The plans are there. The overall design may change a little bit, But I think, Eric, that the stadium plan will keep moving forward. It has to keep moving forward.
Well, and I think two things happened here this week that are going to probably keep that to some degree on track. And again, that's getting an athletic director in literally 1 week's period of time.
Yep.
And finally moving on the president's spot.
So going back to the NIL, fans should not be expected to flip the bill for every single thing. And hear me out. Collectives, season tickets, seat tax. Then you have, and the truth is, Rob, we're being asked to buy streaming services, Peacock, YouTube TV, your cable package.
I mean, we used to buy, you had to subscribe to cable at some point.
I get that. But what I'm saying is ESPN just signed a $7.8 billion deal for the college football playoff through 2032. That's a lot of money. Then you talk, that's just the college football playoff. So you have distributions to conferences through that. You have the TV money, which in the Big Ten is going to be $100 million a year. The athletic department with that revenue should be able to fund the salaries of players during that. You shouldn't have to go to fans and say, you know what, give to us so we can turn around and give it to players. That's what that money is for. They're playing on the field. They're doing that. That television money, that rights money, to me, that belongs to the players just as much as it belongs to the. I know that's hard for people to and it took me a long time to come around to this. I was on board for the amateur model. You talked about when you were a senior in college, you were part of an NCAA group to where you studied the payment of players. And at that time, Rob, you could pay every single NCAA athlete, correct me if I'm wrong, Division I, Division I AA, Division II, and Division III, male and female, $5,000 a year, right?
It was roughly that. I think it was a little less than that. But I mean, at the time, we're talking, this was 1993, 1994. But that was, I think, and I think that was if we took if something like 15% of the net profit, not the gross, but it was, we looked at estimates from, I think we looked at it, a 16-team college football playoff. What would the gross profit be? What would the net profit be? And at the time, if you took, I think it was 15% of the net profit. I mean, and distributed that to all athletes, you could pay everybody roughly $3,000 to $5,000 a year.
And that's what Troy Dannen's going to face when he comes in. Because if Nebraska wants to stay ahead of the curve and be part of the conversation, it needs to be forward thinking like this. I know people don't like to hear it. They just want to go, bah, 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 bah. They don't want to hear it. But you have to think about it. And I hate referring back to Trev Alberts because this is about Troy Dannen being hired. But Trev said it in his introductory press conference at Texas A&M. The pro model is almost 50-50. Not quite there. He thinks the college model might be 60-40, 55-45. You need an athletic director that can think like that. And when Troy Dannen comes to Nebraska, the job is to keep Nebraska at the forefront of being an institution that's still a player in the big market. Agree?
I do agree. It's going to have to happen. And it's, but again, and that's the thing why I mean, when you ask me about cutting sports, Nebraska's future success, on the whole, Nebraska's been, they've been fairly well positioned from an NIL standpoint. From an overall revenue standpoint, you've got, I mean, I hate to say it, the last 10 years, a mediocre product on the field. You're still putting seats out. You're still putting butts in the seats. And I get the whole, well, it's not a real sellout. Fine. You still got 75,000 people showing up in a 90,000 seat stadium most Saturdays to watch what has been, for the most part, a fairly mediocre football product. That says something about the potential at Nebraska. I had a conversation today with one of the guys I work with, and he made the point, he goes, what happens if Rule kind of turns this around and turns Nebraska into a 9-10 win a season kind of program again.
He becomes the most powerful person in the state.
What do you think the dollars are going to be like?
Well, see, that's an interesting take because I talked about this morning on my radio show. And that is, I actually think if we go to this pay-for-play model, because Kalen DeBoer at Alabama just got a contract that pays him $10.5 million. Dabo Swinney's the highest-paid college coach right now at over $11 million. Lincoln Riley's an $11 million deal. Rob, I actually think if universities have to take on a nut of $15 to $20 million a year, it's going to drive coaches' salaries down. I think coaches' salaries are going to have to come back down if that type of revenue is needed and that type of expense is needed to pay players.
Man, it's hard to walk that back.
It is.
I mean, it really is. I mean, and look at the coordinator positions. Good coordinators are $1 to $2 million a year now. So it's that one I think is going to be hard to walk back. I think what's going to ultimately happen to a degree is that I think, and I hope it doesn't happen because I like the model we've got at Nebraska, but I think what ultimately happens is you see increases in tax dollars going to university athletic departments. We're so not used to that at Nebraska, but that's currently that's the model at both places. Is that most schools you've got state tax dollars at most state schools.
True.
You've got state tax dollars supporting the athletic department. You don't have that at Nebraska. So ultimately, I would hope before they start cutting sports, before you see them coming out and saying it's like, yeah, we're not going to pay those kind of dollars to get the best people, whether it's coaches or athletes. I would hope, maybe we change that model.
Quick question. What's the value of men's gymnastics? Seriously. I like Francis Allen. He was but what's the value of men's gymnastics?
I still think until it becomes true pro teams, which kind of already is.
Yes. You're there. We've crossed that
You're
line.
still you're still a university, and I still think there's a mission, and it goes with the whole the overall educational picture. You can ask that question about any sport that doesn't make money,
which is everything but basketball and football.
I mean, and at a school like Nebraska, I think volleyball either breaks even or makes a little bit. I mean, what's the value of swimming? What's the value of wrestling? What's the value of baseball?
I can tell you nothing.
Monetarily, that the value is nothing. I think there's huge value in those sports, though. I think there's fans that place a huge value on all those sports. I think there's an educational value for the athletes themselves, an experience value for the athletics themselves. And I do still feel like the university, as part of its mission, owes it to those athletes to provide that experience for those athletes. But that's also why I hate seeing schools cut athletics when I think there's ways to still fund them.
And I totally understand that. And I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying. Aiden has this question. The leadership model of the assistant president overseeing the AD benefited Trev. Yes, it did. He reported directly to Ted Carter. But does that model change with the new hires of Dannen and Dr. Gold?
I don't know if it will change. I don't have a problem going back to the previous hierarchy. I think that was a Ted Carter thing.
Let me explain why I think it's beneficial for Troy Dannen to answer directly to Dr. Gold. And that is, you can't have academics get in the way. And what I mean by that is the university athletic department is a big multi-million-dollar business. You shouldn't have to answer to the chancellor. Let the chancellor run the academics. Let you worry about politicking the state legislature, go and get your money, whatever. Here we're talking about an athletic department that is a revenue generator. It's big business. Just go straight to the top. Just go straight to the top. Treat it as a separate entity. I know that's going to rub people the wrong way. But I just think athletics is getting too big. The stakes are too high, and you want to eliminate as much bureaucracy and politics as possible. And the best way to do that is to go straight to the top. Now, the big question will be, Troy Dannen doesn't know Dr. Gold, and Dr. Gold doesn't know Troy Dannen. What will their working relationship be like? And will Dr. Gold, who is an academic, loves the UNMC, what will his tenor be towards athletics? That's a big question that none of us know.
Well,
right?
I think he's going to be charged with having to. I mean, he's going to be told you better have a font spot for it because it's. I mean, that's one of those. Again, we talk about the brand. We talk about the face of a university. At Nebraska, it's still the athletic department.
One
as bad as it's been.
Rob,
It's the football team.
Rob, let me ask you this: give me an institution of higher learning besides Yale, Harvard, or an Ivy League school, maybe Stanford, where the athletic department is not the brand and the identity of a school.
It's very few.
And when we're talking Power 5, and if I want to get it down to a micro level, give me a Power 5 school. Vanderbilt, Northwestern. But to me, Northwestern, your brand is still the football team.
Yeah. But even if you go and look at smaller schools, I mean, again, we talk about small school ball because I got a kid playing it. You go up to Augustana, I believe it's almost 20% of the student population plays an NC2A sport. You go to most NAIA schools, that number climbs, I think, at a lot of NAIA schools, depending on the school and the size of the school, that percentage is 25 to almost 40% at some schools of the students play a sport. The athletic department at even those small schools is oftentimes by far and away the brand recognition. It's the face of those schools.
Troy Dannen's walking into a very good situation. You have what many would consider a top 5 fan base in the country. You probably have a top 5 football coach in the country. You have a football coach that is very well liked so far, has hit a home run in the way he interacts with everybody. Fred Hoiberg is an interesting situation. They gave him a 2-year extension yesterday before Troy Dannen was hired. Do you think they did that on purpose to say, listen, there's a new AD coming in. We don't need you worrying about anything. Even though you're having a great year, you're going to get a 2-year extension.
I think it was well-deserved. They did the same thing with Amy Williams on the women's basketball side as well, too. I think you had both coaches. They had great seasons. Reward that. I mean, I
don't disagree with you.
Yeah, so it's hard for me to look at that and say, like, okay, we got to get this done before the new guy gets here. If it is, I almost wonder if it was like, hey, let's get this done so Troy doesn't have to worry about it.
That bingo, you're right. I mean,
yeah, it's one less thing
to worry about. There's plenty of other shit to worry about. The last thing he has to worry about is trying to negotiate an extension for 2 basketball coaches.
Yeah, let's get you going. We're gonna knock a few things off the checklist that you got to deal with when you get here. We'll get that taken care of. But I do think they wanted to reward those people, and they wanted the merits of what they'd done to stand on its own and not have to go through an evaluation by a new athletic director. So, no, I think that was warranted. I think it was, like I said, it's one less thing he has to worry about now.
So you didn't know anything about Troy Dannen before the day started. You probably know a lot more about Troy Dannen now. Again, my feelings toward Troy Dannen, I'm in a unique situation. I've known Troy for 33 years. And so I think this is a good hire. Are you happy with the hire of Troy Dannen as the athletic director, even though you didn't know anything about him, at 6:00 this morning?
Yeah, and part of the reason is because we've had some polarizing people. whether you like Trev or don't like Trev, he was polarizing.
He was.
He could be very polarizing to some people, to a lot of people. Sean Eichhorst, man, when he got hired, there was a lot of people who were like, man, I don't know about this guy. Look at some of the
Perlman hired him.
I know. And so there was the why, but there was also, when you looked at his track record of hires, there were some huge question marks there with his hires. I mean, I think people were perfectly happy with Tom Osborne because, well, hell, it's Tom Osborne, for God's sakes. Steve Peterson, I mean, that was a guy that went from, oh, this is going to be a great hire, to very, very, very quickly, the guy became very polarizing and not well liked within the athletic department. And then he became very polarizing and not well liked outside of the athletic department. I don't know if I've seen anybody come in where, like I said, the only thing I've heard remotely negative about Dannen is that, well, he doesn't have a ton of Power 5 experience. He's got the little bit of time at Washington. He oversaw transition to the Big Ten. But that's it when it comes to the Power 5 leadership that he has experience with.
How much did Trev Alberts have?
Zero. Absolutely zero. Here's the thing about Troy that I really like. I texted you to ask him, like, hey, can you go ask Mark Farley about this guy? What's Farley think of him? And you're like, forget that. I know the guy. He's great. Since then, everybody who knows the guy, nobody has anything bad to say about the guy. When Trev got hired, there was a lot of people who were like, we didn't like Trev. There's things we didn't like about Trev.
100%.
There was not, I mean, the most people can say, I mean, the worst I heard about is like, God, he's a great guy. It just, he doesn't have any experience at the Power 5 level. How's that going to play out? But people at Northern Iowa really liked the guy. I mean, I get it. You cut a sport, it's going to piss people off.
100%.
It's going to. I understand that. But I mean, sometimes you get cut. I mean, I don't think anybody cuts a sport.
Nobody wants to cut a sport.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that. And it becomes kind of this, like, are we going to cut? I mean, usually it's, are we going to cut this sport or this sport? It's not we could have saved the sports if we had done this. It's usually it usually is a last resort. So
Aiden just asked a question. Owen, bring that back up if you can. Owen, random, but it's Doug Ewald leaving for A&M too. Well, we might.
Doug's a friend of the program. We got to get him on the show.
He's scheduled to be in here next week. So maybe next Monday or Tuesday, we might be recording in the studio in the basement with Doug Ewald. The goal, there's an over-under out there, how many months it's going to take to get Troy Dannen into the basement. Hopefully it doesn't take longer than 6 months. They set the over-under at 6 months.
You know the guy.
but I also know what happens, right? I mean, he'll always text me. But I also understand the bureaucracy and what happens. It's not going to be easy to get him up here,
and
right?
the time commitments.
Time commitments.
I mean,
I get it.
Again, you can look at Trev, and again, let's say everybody loves Trev. So we're just let's say everybody loves Trev, and let's say, okay, well, I know Trev. I mean, I do. I every so often I'll text him. Every so often I'll talk to him. It's not a lot, but every so often. It'd be impossible to get Trev in the basement, not because of bureaucracy and politics, but go look at him. He's at every damn sporting event. He put a public persona out there, and he showed up in public supporting his coaches, and he was at those sporting events. That stuff, that's year round. It doesn't stop. It's the time commitments for these guys. It's absolute. There's a reason you're getting paid $1 million+ a year. It's because you're never not working.
Fair point. And I want to go back to the Doug Ewald situation, what he just asked. Doug worked really closely with Dr. Gold. So he did some stuff with UNMC, also at UNO. I can't say whether or not Doug would go to A&M. I'm just saying he has a very good working relationship with Dr. Gold. You might see, if Doug didn't stay in the athletic department, you might see him take a higher role of similar situation, maybe within the university system. I will say this: Doug used to be the tax commissioner for the state of Nebraska. Nobody knows numbers like Doug Ewald. The dude is flat out smart when it comes to a spreadsheet. He knows numbers. He knows money. Okay. In these times, you want Doug Ewald running your ledger book. I'm just saying.
Well, and here's the other thing. I mean, Doug loves Husker athletics.
Yes, he does.
He loves the University of Nebraska system. He's not limited to the University of Nebraska system. Doug's a guy who could go anywhere.
Yes.
And have his ability to go back to the private sector and work in the private sector, he could make way more money than what he's making now.
Way more money.
He's doing what he's doing now because he likes it.
Yeah. So Troy, Dannen, if you're watching this tonight, because I let you know we were going to be live on YouTube, Doug Ewald's a guy you want to keep in your athletic department. Just saying. Because he's a friend of the show, but he's also a smart dude and he knows how to run a ledger book.
Dude, my IQ goes up anytime I hang out with Doug.
Exactly.
So
if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We like to get our followers and our subscribers up. We're sitting about 3,400, 3,500. God, we'd like to hit 10,000. We'd like to hit 20,000. We'd like to hit 30,000. We talk about a lot of stuff. If you've missed any part of our podcast, if you're new to the Doc Hawk podcast, you can go back and watch interviews with Tony Veland, with Brendan Stye, with Bruce Chubbuck, with Kyle Peterson. Those are really, Damon Benning is a good one. And Owen was letting me know tonight, believe it or not, and I think we're going to try to get him up here in the next couple of weeks. Bill Bush, the one we did a year ago, Rob, people still go back and watch the Bill Bush interview from over a year ago. That's one of our top weekly watched videos. That
was a great interview.
It was a great one. I talked to Brendan tonight and at the tequila tasting, and he was like, we could have gone for like 3 hours. I go, I don't disagree with you. The time commitment that it takes sometimes. I remember Tony came and goes, we're really going to go for 2 hours. And all of a sudden we're like an hour and 45 minutes in. He goes, man, we could go for another hour, couldn't we? I go, yeah, we try to do that. So, but yeah, so subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you won't be disappointed. If you haven't followed Dr. Rob on Twitter, holy crap. Owen, is this true? If this is true,
Travis,
Troy Dannen, what's going on?
would I mislead you? Would you not be the first person I talk to when I get to town? The plane just landed. I'm still on it, but I'm calling you to say hi. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, Troy Dannen, it's great to hear from you. First of all, congratulations on being named the athletic director of the University of Nebraska.
I appreciate it. It's been a day now today, but man, this is something else. It's honor, opportunity. I mean, this is growing up in the Midwest, it's home, but at the same time, I mean, this is one of the blue bloods in college athletics, and to think you get to be a part of it's pretty special.
You texted me the day Trev left, and we had a brief conversation. I hope you don't mind me sharing that. I didn't say what we were talking about, but you didn't. I didn't follow up with the question of, are you interested in the job? Did you know you were interested in the job when we were talking?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I'm pretty happy at Washington, but it just when home calls and whether you're from Iowa, whether you're from Nebraska, you're a Midwest boy. My wife's from the Midwest, and I was also now that I'm in the Big Ten, I also kind of want to know what's happening in the other Big Ten schools. So I didn't really get involved. I got a call a couple of days ago, and one thing led to another, and here I am walking into basically the job of a lifetime.
Were you hesitant to leave a job in Washington after 6 months?
Oh yeah. But this wasn't about Washington. This was about coming home, and timing's never probably exactly what you want it to be, but also having this opportunity may never happen again. So you got to take advantage of timing when it presents itself. So as rough as that was, knowing what I was coming to, made the price well worth it.
Troy, what do you think is the biggest? What do you see yourself have to be a unifier right now? What do you think is going to this job? And of course, a new president coming on board. What do you think is going to be the hardest adjustment part of this?
Well, first of all, the biggest part of the job is to be a champion, being champion for the student athletes, being champion for the university, for the department, for the fans, the donors, the alums, the state of Nebraska, because, I think more than maybe any other job in the country, this athletic department reflects on the people of the state as much, if not more, than anybody. So, you've got to be a champion in everything that we do. And, along with that, if you're a champion for all the people in what we do, it leads to a lot of other great things happening. We got a lot of tumult and change going on in college athletics. And I think the other big job, you talk about the micro pieces that maybe come specifically here, but the other big job is make sure we're well positioned, to lead in the next 5 years too. We're at the big boy table, and we're a big boy at the big boy table, and people are going to follow us. And so let's make sure we're leading and we're not trying to chase anybody into this new era, new wave of whatever college athletics is going to look like.
During the interview process, was Matt Rule part of the people that ask you questions? And what are your impressions of Coach Rule?
Oh yeah, I've known Matt for quite a while, and I talked to him along the way. And part of the attraction to this job is getting to partner with a guy like Matt. In a year or two, people are gonna rightfully say he's one of the best 2 or 3 coaches in the country. Once everybody's around him and sees how he builds this program, he's elite in every way. He's an elite human being. He's a motivator, and I'll tell you what, he's going to get everybody juiced. And what happens in football bleeds off on everything else, and so there will be a lot of energy and a lot of juice around Matt.
Troy, I know
I'm going to tell you something, Trev.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, I gotta pop off here in a minute, but I just wanted to make sure that I talked to you and said hi. And I saw you a little bit on Twitter. I actually imposed a social media ban on myself today because I knew what it was going to look like. But,
smart man right there.
I did see you were going to be on, so when I landed, I had a chance to talk to you, my friend. But I will see you later.
Hey.
Talk to you soon, and I really appreciate your support.
One thing, can I put you on the spot? Dr. Rob Zatechka, who's on here with me, is a former Husker. We do this podcast in the basement. Will you come to the? I want to ask you right now. Will you come to the basement and do a podcast for this?
Well, I'm not committing to go to anybody's basement when I've been around the ground for 5 minutes in Nebraska. But my guess is I will find my way to your basement at some point.
All right, Troy, we appreciate.
But I will not commit to it.
Yes. Okay. Then I'm just be blowing up your phone. Okay. Hey, congratulations.
Yeah, all right.
We'll stay in touch, and welcome to Nebraska, sir.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Troy Dannen joining us on the Doc Talk podcast presented by BetFred Sports. How about that, Rob?
God, you are for real. You are big time.
You know what that just did? It just pissed off every Nebraska fan because you're like, that guy.
Freaking Iowa people. I tell you what. Which I do want to ask him at some point. Did he go to Marshalltown High School?
I don't know the answer to that. I think he did, but I don't know the answer to that. He grew up outside of Marshalltown on a farm.
Yeah, so, I got to ask him at some point. Pure curiosity on my part. That was my dad. That's where my dad grew up. So
Troy Dannen lands in Nebraska on the plane, and who does he call first? The Doc
Travis.
No, he called the Doc Talk podcast. I don't think we can go any more from that, right? I mean, that's like the perfect time to wrap this thing up, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good play. We're not getting any better than that.
It doesn't get any better than that. That is freaking awesome. So congratulations to Troy. You heard the athletic director right here on the Doc Talk podcast. And wow, I sent him a text right before we started. I didn't know he was on a plane. I said, hey, by the way, we're going to go live on Twitter. And lucky I sent it to his text message and not on social media because he gave himself a social media ban. So that's good. So there you heard it. The new athletic director at Nebraska, Troy Dannen. You heard his first comments. I believe his press conference will be tomorrow or Friday. You'll hear more from him. And he didn't fully commit, but it sounded like he would come up to the basement. Didn't it sound like that, Rob?
At some point, and I'm like I said, I'm one of those guys. I totally understand the time commitments that these guys have. It's pretty impressive.
It really, really is. So if you missed any part of the show, it's going to be on a replay on YouTube. Share it with friends. We'll try to break down that interview with Troy and get that out on YouTube and Twitter especially as well. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports. Follow me on Twitter at Travis Creates. Also, you can like our Facebook. We're on TikTok. All sorts of good things. So, Dr. Rob, I appreciate your time tonight. I've been asking for a lot of it lately. I know you're on call, and thanks for joining us, buddy.
Absolutely. This was fun. This was way more fun than I thought it was going to be at the end there. That's
All
fun
right.
to listen to them.
We will talk to everybody next time on the Doc Talk podcast presented by BetFred Sports.